right, hello and welcome everybody. I am here with the Davis Phinney Foundation Ambassadors. Well, 7 of them, is that right? 6 of them. And we're really excited to talk to you today about what it's like to be newly diagnosed and what are all the things that you can do to live well with Parkinson's. My name is Melanie Dizon. I'm the Director of Education, and I have the great fortune of getting to work with our community of ambassadors and our community of people living with Parkinson's. And one of the things that we get asked about a lot, well, the questions that we get are from people who've been newly diagnosed and they are trying to, navigate this new normal. And they're really trying to learn from a lot of people who've already been through this before. So today, the first thing we're going to do is everyone's going to introduce themselves, tell you a little bit about themselves, and then we'll dive into some questions. So, Kat, I would love it if you got started.
My name is Kat Hill, and I live in Portland, Oregon. I have been diagnosed now for 5 years. I was 47 when I was diagnosed. You can do the math on that. I got engaged with the Davis Phinney Foundation because I loved the motto. I loved the Every Victory Counts motto. I loved living well today. It really resonated with where I wanted to be as a mother of teenagers, and it's been a powerful journey for me working with them.
Great, thank you, Kat. Steve?
Sure. My name is Steve Hovey. I'm 62 years old. I was diagnosed in 2007, so almost 13 years ago. I was introduced to the Davis Phinney Foundation about 10 years after my diagnosis. About 2 years after my diagnosis. What was frustrating me after I was diagnosed is I figured that there had to be something that we could do to help ourselves. I was getting no answers from the doctor outside of, take medicine. And I asked him about exercise, and he said, well, sure, exercise is good for everybody. So it's I'm sure it's good for Parkinson's. But I just figured there had to be more. When I was introduced to the Davis Phinney Foundation, I saw that, not only did they, their message and the research that they had done just was so, it paralleled what I was thinking. It really resonated with me. It's been a big part of my life personally, from a health standpoint and just from a wellness standpoint. I was located on the East Coast. I live in New York. There wasn't representation out here at the time. I volunteered to be a representative at a few seminars and conferences. And so when the ambassadorship program came up, I gladly accepted it and really enjoyed it.
Great, thank you. Lorraine.
I'm Lorraine Wilson. I live in Abilene, Texas, and I was diagnosed at age 62 just a few years ago, going into year 3 of the official diagnosis. Of course, suspected it years before that with certain symptoms as they built. Why become an ambassador? Well, I found out when I was diagnosed that there were no resources around here. It took me months even to find the support group. We have no incredible opportunities to visit a movement disorder specialist unless we drive 3 or more hours. So being an ambassador at least helped me bring resources to the area. We really have stepped up, I think, service to persons who are newly diagnosed, and that is very rewarding.
Great, thank you, Lorraine. Hi, Joe.
Hi.
Can you tell us about where you live and what you're doing and when you were diagnosed?
Sure. My name is Joe OConnor. I was diagnosed in 2016 at the age of 57. Go through the math yourself. One of the first things I was aware of was that there were no support groups in my area directly, but there was a support group that was a ways off. And at the support group meeting, somebody handed me this book called Every Victory Counts. And I said, oh, this looks like an interesting book. And I started reading it. And then I said, wow, this is incredible stuff. And then somebody from the foundation contacted me and said, hey, would you like to be an ambassador? I said, absolutely. And that's really where I am right now. I find it to be incredibly rewarding to be an ambassador and incredibly engaging for the rest of the community.
Excellent. Thank you. Marty.
Hi, I'm Marty Acevedo. I'm from San Diego. I was diagnosed in 2004 at the age of 44. So I've had the diagnosis for 16 years. I joined Davis Phinney because I got a really horrible set of prognosis from my original movement disorder specialist and wanted to give people good, solid information that was based in hope and not just bad news. I felt that the Davis Phinney Foundation's values and missions aligned well with my own. And I'm blessed to be able to get people past the fear and anger and just awfulness of their diagnosis so that they can find their way to living their best life.
Great. Thank you, Marty. And Jill. Can't hear you.
She's muted.
There we go. Hi, I am Jill Ader. I was diagnosed in '05, so we're coming on 15 years now. I am currently in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. Although I was an ambassador in Tacoma, Washington, and in Solvang, California, I move a lot. And we are living for 8 months in Mexico, which part of what I love about the Davis Phinney Foundation is the concept of live your life today and live your best. And that's what we're doing. So we are in sunny Mexico.
I'm jealous. That sounds excellent. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. Touched on it a little bit. Marty, you definitely touched on this. I'd love to hear your response to this, but for those of you who'd like to share, what was the most difficult part about being diagnosed with Parkinson's? Marty, if you could start us off, that would be great.
Sure. My movement disorder specialist originally, when she said as she left the room, you have Parkinson's. Your husband better keep his job because you're going to need the insurance. And by the way, you'll be bedridden in 10 years. Well, she's wrong. I mean, I've had Parkinson's 16 years and I'm in the best shape I've ever been. And I live my life. We travel, we do everything we want to do. But I also had to rethink who I thought I was and what my future was going to hold. And the foundation has really helped me to get there with the Every Victory Counts manual and support of the people I've met there and along with people I talk with here in Southern California.
Great. Yeah, that must have been pretty grim. Had you known anybody who had Parkinson's before that? Were you, kind of, was this an expected thing that the doctor was going to say to you?
Not at all. I was pretty much in shock and devastated. I did have a friend who had Parkinson's and I thought, oh, I really hope I never have to deal with that. So I had that as my background, but the doctor just blew me away and gave me no information. So it took me a while to get past that. Went back to my primary care physician and he said, no, just wait a minute. We're going to hold off on your starting meds and we'll see what happens. And then I obviously did not go back to that movement disorder specialist and found someone that I could engage with and that was supportive of me.
Although, can I add something?
Sure.
I think it is important that you find a movement disorder specialist, but it's got to be the right one. It took me 5 different movement disorder specialists to find the one I really love. And then I moved and found a new one, and it took me 2 more. And then I moved again and found another one. So I'm finally on the right one, but it's also, she's in Tacoma, Washington, so I've got to go back and forth. There's nothing in Mexico outside of Guadalajara and Mexico City, but there are neurologists here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. Lorraine, you also brought up that, you don't have a movement disorder specialist in Abilene and you normally have to drive 3 or so hours. And I think that, one of the things that we encourage, if it's possible, every single person with Parkinson's that we've spoken with has talked about how important that movement disorder specialist is. And if you don't have access to them, which many, many people don't, figure out what are some ways to get there. Maybe a friend can drive you, a family member. And even if you just go once every 2 years, it can make a really, really big difference. And so I love that you're making sure that you do, even if it's a 3.5 hour drive. Lorraine, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yes, and let me start by saying I met this physician at a Victory Summit.
Oh, wow.
So that was, a serendipity. When I heard her speak, I thought, oh, where's this person live? And luckily it was within a reasonable drive. I mean, in Texas, everything is 3 to 6 hours away. And I just felt a connection. And when I said, are you taking new patients? The answer was yes. Of course, that was 5 or 6 months later. But then when I went in, the connection was real because she listened and she asked what I thought were viable questions. You know, I didn't want to be treated like an idiot. No offense to other physicians that think people don't know what's going on. You know, we've all read and studied. I think most people who are diagnosed do that. And I found that she not only listened well, she would know when, well, you understand this, right? Let's move on. And so we didn't waste time either. And it's been very productive, very helpful. So that's been very rewarding.
Great.
I was going to say about the doctors, if I might.
Sure.
Okay. I think I have an advantage. There's a lot of movement specialists and everything in my area. But I think if you have an area where there are a lot of doctors, treat this doctor differently than other doctors. Make sure that you're comfortable with them. I fired 3 doctors because I said, you're not getting the message of who I am. One of the doctors had the, typical glum one, glum future type of thing, which is no good at all. And another doctor was radically opposed to clinical trials, which I enjoy doing. And another doctor wouldn't even hang in the room with me. I mean, she delivered the news to me almost like, okay, and I've got to run now. And I was like, okay, well, I really don't want to deal with you either. So I think one of the things that I always encourage people when they're just starting out, you not to dislike your doctor, but be careful because this is a person you're going to be relying on a lot for the rest of your life. And you want to make sure that you feel comfortable with them.
Great.
If you have the luxury.
Yeah.
And Mel, let me say, I was just going to say, several of our Texas movement disorder specialists do telehealth. So the persons might drive once or twice, and then the next meeting be via computer.
Yeah, that's so great. That's so great.
Or you do something like I do. I know I'm going to be every 6 months since I'm at a stable point. I just plan on going from wherever I am in the world, which who knows where that'll be, every 6 months back to Tacoma.
Right.
Yep.
Can I also mention I have a weird situation too, because my mother and my younger sister both have Parkinson's. So I was diagnosed at 42, my mom at 65, and my sister at 46, I think. So I knew what I was getting into because my mom was a few years ahead of me. Because she's at almost 20 years now. So I saw what was going to happen. And the beautiful thing is it hasn't. Things are very different. That's one thing I think we all have to keep in mind, and the doctors should keep in mind too, is that one person's path, even if it's a direct family member, as I found, is not going to be your own path.
What would you say has there been a difference between either the care that your mom and sister have received or the actions that they've taken? Like what do you see that's different?
Technology and the medications have changed dramatically every single year. So, for example, my mom was told not to start any carbidopa-levodopa treatment for a long time and to put it off, where I was told take it and it'll enhance your life. I was the first of the 3 of us to get DBS. We've now all had it. My sister has a different system brand than I do, which it was interesting because the improvements even in the last 7 years have been dramatic. Right. So I think technology and medical know-how has all been really a big difference. So you can't look at somebody else and say, oh, this is going to be my path the same as theirs.
Right. Steve,
Agreed.
What would you say to people who, I think a lot of times our community asks us, why do I need a movement disorder specialist? Or they're talking to us and they're just saying, my doctor said this and they won't do that. What do you tell them about why you need to see a movement disorder specialist and at the minimum a neurologist? What do you answer?
Their approach is completely different. My dad was diagnosed 2 years ago, and he started off the route which is the correct route. He went to a neurologist, and he got the diagnosis, and he was very comfortable just going back to this gentleman. And I knew all he was saying is, well, there's been no change. Do you want me to, what should we do with your medication? So my mom and I researched a movement disorder doctor, local. Fortunately, they lived right outside of New York City, so they had plenty of choices. and it's just been, it's night and day. I mean, they've developed a relationship. He really trusts her. You know, she's not afraid to experiment with the medicine because he had an adverse effect with the Cinemet. So it's, you know, the best thing is I was trying to get him to exercise. He wouldn't do it. She said, Ken, you need to exercise. Now, what do you want for Christmas? It's all exercise clothes. You know, rock steady boxing. So it's a completely different level of care.
That's great. That's excellent. So what were some of the things that changed in your life? You know, what were some of the things you noticed that changed in your life or your approach to life, you know, after you were diagnosed? Anybody?
You know, one thing I think is important is we have to realize, and I want to say this up front, it's very important, is it's not just our own lives that's changed, it's our care partners or spouses or children. It's their lives that have changed dramatically. I think that that's really important, that we're aware of the changes that they go through. In fact, I think my husband has a harder time than I do. I'm very accepting now, and he still gets very frustrated.
That's a good point.
And I'd like to touch on this too, Mel. I was working full-time as a nurse practitioner, delivering babies and taking 24 to 48-hour call in my profession, and I loved it dearly, but it was very, very physically and emotionally demanding, and I realized that stress really contributed significantly to my symptom management. And so for me, it meant transitioning out of my career into essentially early retirement or disability. And that was huge for me. I didn't think my identity was so wrapped up in what I did for work, and I was wrong. So it's been both challenging and rewarding to redefine myself in what I call Act 2. Because my husband says I'm too young to be retired. Bless him. We love him. But I want to stay active. I want to stay vital. I want to still be of service in my community, and being an ambassador is a way that I can do that. I run a support group. I speak. I'm working on a book. But it really, the reins are in your hands when you're diagnosed. And certainly there's a grief process that needs to happen. And I don't want to belittle that. But what you do after you grieve is really up to you. And how you define yourself and how you're going to, in your brain, get your mind around having a diagnosis and still learning to thrive. And you can do that. I'm here to tell you, you can do it. And do I miss catching babies? You bet. Do I cry when I watch Call the Midwife? I do. But I still feel vital. I feel engaged. I'm traveling. I'm doing some very exciting things. So I'm living. And we can all do that if we choose to.
I just like to follow up on that because I think that's huge. I sold my business in like 2011 was when it really changed hands. I stayed on for a couple of years just during the transition. Moved up to Saratoga, and so for the last 4 years, I've been just trying to like figure out like, you know, what's next, and been doing a lot of volunteer work. Obviously, the Davis Phinney Foundation work has been great, really great, incredibly rewarding, but it wasn't business, and I really missed being involved in business. So what I realized is why I sold the business in the first place is how adversely stress affects people with Parkinson's. So of course, I get talked into being partners in a new business. And now I'm back to working like over, 20 hours a week, plus some other things that volunteer work that I'm doing. And I'm busier than I've ever been in my entire, I think I was before I sold the business. And it's not good. It's not good. And so as I was laying in bed today, this morning at 3 o'clock in the morning, staring at the ceiling, like, what gives? Something has to give. And I think it's going to be the business side. Hopefully this won't get broadcast around the country, but somebody's like, hey, what did you say in that interview? But I think that's what's going to have to give. I'm just going to have to say to these guys, look,
I like to say more about the stress.
Yeah.
Stress is very, very big with people with Parkinson's. It's something that somebody who's just getting diagnosed should be aware of. You shouldn't be, you definitely will have some adverse reactions, but you really want to include them in your care team, somebody like a social worker or a psychologist or somebody like that, because it is a very different situation that you're going to be running into. The other thing which I heard, and it's something I would say to people, is find a support group. If you can't find a support group, start one. There are a couple of people on this call, including myself, that have started support groups because they weren't in our area. I think the whole idea of having a support group, I mean, you can have virtual support groups that are on the internet and stuff like that, but nothing matches being in the same room with other people that are dealing with the same problem. And I found that from working with the people, other people, I've been able to understand some of my reactions to some of the things that have happened. So I really would strongly suggest one of the first things a person should do when they have a diagnosis of Parkinson's is to find a support group. And if they can't find a support group, then start one up. I mean, because it's not that difficult. They can always ask any of the ambassadors in the Phinney Foundation that have started support groups. I know myself, I'd be glad to, talk to them and let them give them information.
Can I jump on that, Joe, too? I think support groups, it depends on how old you are, because the first time I went to a support group and I was 42 years old, scared the pants off me.
Exactly.
Really? Because it was all old people. It was all people who seemed to me they were 110 at the time. Now I'm more comfortable with it in my mid-50s, but I found it took me a while to find a group. There are support groups for young onset. And once I found that young group, it became a different kind of support group. And so I wouldn't just go to any support group. The APDA has a great list they put out of support groups in the area. So I think in any area, I think that was a real good resource for me. And then start talking to people.
Right.
Yeah,
and if
absolutely.
Party, walk out.
I'm sorry, Steve, what'd you say?
I said, if it's a pity party, walk out.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
That was
Absolutely.
my
Don't let them bring you down. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Steve.
I said that was my first experience, and I was like, forget this,
Exactly.
And it was a young onset group. It was people my own age.
Oh, wow.
I've since found out that it's changed dramatically, and now it's very supportive, which I'm glad to see. But yeah, I mean that's the last thing you do when you're first diagnosed.
One of the things
absolutely.
that I've learned, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Lorraine.
One of the things I've learned about our support group is that the larger group is more like just time together to share something, a DVD, and not a DVD, something on YouTube or a discussion. We've used the EVC curriculum. It tends to be more general. It's a variety of ages, but it's the smaller groups that really, I think, find more support from each other. We have a small group of 4 and 5 persons who meet for lunch every 2 weeks. We have a group of coffee drinkers. I think they meet more often, maybe because they like the coffee, but they really learn about each other and support each other a variety of ways. We do service projects like to get out of our own issues. And my favorite one right now is that we are painting and decorating duffel bags for kids going into the foster program through the school district, and or kids that are homeless, so that they have something besides a Walmart bag to carry their clothes in. So I think the role of the support group, what is its intention, what is its mission, can make a big difference. I think I really relate to Jill's statement about, the reaction to some of what I saw and heard the first time I went. But it was really more that when I was diagnosed, one of my dear, dear, dear friends was in the very last stages of Parkinson's, and it was pretty brutal to watch. And I thought, oh my gosh. But, that was his experience, and it had been a while. But that did color my first reaction to both the diagnosis and to thinking, well, what do I do now? So I think that the support group's options are varied. And if at first you don't succeed, find a different group or modify your group, offer them some options.
Well, the other thing, I think a lot of us, I think all of us women in this group are also on the Facebook group for women, the Stronger group, which I think is hugely important for all of us, because as women, we have a whole different set of situations, not just as in our own lives, but our symptoms are different.
Right.
Yeah, Marty, I think you're involved in quite a few groups, aren't you?
Yes, I am. Locally, I'm involved in our Parkinson's Association here, and then I do a lot, of course, with one-on-one interaction with people. I find that that's really helpful to people, especially when they're first diagnosed, because they just want to be heard and to have you relate to them. One of the things that I encourage them to do is to remember that they are the most important part of their healthcare team, and not to let the physician forget that, because each of us is different. We all have a different type of Parkinson's, and you are the expert on your Parkinson's. And then I also like to really reiterate about stress, and we've all talked about it, but stress exacerbates every single symptom that we have. My doctor told me to get out of my toxic work environment, which was also in healthcare, and I did. I just felt the stress flowing off my shoulders as I drove home that last day, and I took and ran with it. And now, looking at my calendar on the refrigerator that I keep there for my husband because he never knows where I am, I'm busier than ever, as we all are. And so, going back to your original question, I'm involved with Aware and Care and the different support groups. I do a lot of talks with different support groups, and it's having a positive attitude is as important as exercise, as important as socialization, and just being knowledgeable about what's going on with you.
Right. I like, and mention the care team. I'd love to know if you all could share, if you had to do it over again, or maybe you feel like you did it completely perfectly the first time, who are the people, or who's the one person aside from a movement disorder specialist that you think was, the best person to have on your team from the very, very beginning? And some people, go back and say, oh gosh, I wish I had this. But, for the people who are newly diagnosed and like, I don't really need a care team, I'm not that bad right now. For those of you—
A personal trainer.
Okay, personal trainer, says Jill. Kat, what about you?
I would say a therapist, a counselor.
Mental health, mental wellness
Yep.
therapist. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Steve?
My wife.
Your wife. Everybody wants Steve's wife. Okay.
Yeah, she's been amazing.
Marty?
I'm a physical therapist.
Okay. Joe?
Psychologist, social worker, somebody like that.
Okay. And Lorraine?
Well, after spouse, I have to go with my peer faculty, because we created a research team, and it was a fantastic way to, kind of buffer that newness and take action immediately.
I love that everybody had somebody different, because I think it just speaks to how different it is, and how you all need something different, right? Depending upon how old you were, or how long, you had been experiencing symptoms before you were like officially diagnosed, and how long you've had Parkinson's now and can look back and say, oh, I've seen a lot. And I know that the people that I work with, like they struggle a lot because they didn't have a physical therapist, or, they didn't have someone to kind of walk them through the ups and downs, the emotional ups and downs of it. So that's great. And it speaks to that it's really important for everybody, right, to have their own agency and take initiative to find the people that are going to help them the most. And they can't always expect their doctors to say, hey, you should do this, or you need this, right? You're really relying on your friends with Parkinson's to say, hey, you should check this out, or have you thought about this?
Right.
And Mel, one of the things that dawned on me actually just recently, because I was talking to someone about having my own, care team, I really assigned myself the role of team captain. I need to be my own advocate first.
Right.
Because others don't
Absolutely.
know what I think inside.
100%.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Can I bring up another subject?
Sure.
I think it's important that for a newly diagnosed person, I wish somebody had told me this about 2 years earlier, start keeping really good medical records for not just your health care, but for your personal finances. Because if you ever do disability, you need those records. And I think it's incredibly important. And then if you move or have to change anything, you have them with you. So get the records, start keeping them on a disk or on your computer or on your phone, but digitally. I think that's hugely important.
Great. Yeah. And we actually have some, we just did a financial wellness webinar where kind of walked through a checklist of all the really important things to have. And there are a couple of digital sites that can help you organize and house your things. So I'll include that link when I share the show notes here. One of the topics I'd love to talk about, because it's a really big one, is medication. And can some of you share your medication story, if you had something where, oh gosh, it wasn't working, or hey, it worked right off the bat? People really struggle with it. And then they struggle also with the management of it. How do I make sure that I'm doing it on time? And how do I experiment with it? And how do I work with my doctor? So if anybody wants to jump in on that, that would be great.
Sure.
Go ahead, Joe.
Okay. Well, I take Cinemet like most people do, and I also take Ropinirole. I used to take Nupro before that. The cost factor for Nupro is so high that I can't afford it. So Ropinirole is a substitute I use for that. If somebody can find an exact way to make sure to take medicine on time, you'll make my wife and me very happy, because I'm notorious for being a little bit late or a lot late with my medicine. But I think the big thing about it is it goes back to having a doctor you can trust, because you want to work with your motion specialist. My motion specialist was really great in helping me, because I couldn't afford, well, I could afford, but it would have bankrupted us, Nupro, finding a substitute for it. And she was very good about working with me through the process and not just sort of leaving me there saying, okay, well, this is the drug you should take, and if you can't take it, that's your problem. I think that's a big thing that has to be there. And you have to also be willing to kind of experiment yourself. One of the things I've experimented with is I love to run, and I can't run the runs I used to run anymore, marathons, but I can run 5Ks. And I found that if I take my medication about 40-45 minutes before a 5K, I can usually have it go through the entire race, which is good for me. But that requires a little bit of experimentation. So I had to experiment in some races. I took it right before the race, and that didn't work. Some races I took it on the normal schedule, that didn't work. So I've kind of experimented with it. I think one of the things that was said to me early on, which is a good thing to keep in mind, is Parkinson's medication is not toxic. In that sense, it's not going to kill you. So it doesn't mean you should go around and throw 20 of them down your throat or something like that. You probably get sick. But more, it's something to experiment. I also like the comments that we've already heard about it. You're the captain of your own health care, and actually everybody is in that situation. It's just people with Parkinson's who become to realize it the most, because everybody who doesn't even have Parkinson's still ultimately is responsible for their health care. If the doctor makes a bad decision, well, you're going to pay for it. That's it. So I think really you can get a good sense of what type of medication to use from your doctor, but you want to be able to think about what you're trying to use your medication for, or what you're not worried about. I mean, some people are very concerned about making sure that they take their Cinemet before they go to bed so they sleep well. Fortunately, right now in this stage of my Parkinson's, I don't have that problem, so I don't. So anyway, I'll say nothing more for a minute.
Thanks. Anyone else?
I'm bad, and I got to clarify it, because I've never, ever taken my medication on schedule in 15 years. And it's not, no, but I find that work.
Go from like 35 pills to like, no.
I did. I went from 28 pills a day to now I take 4.
Wow.
And I went after, I think I'm the only one in this group. Right. I'm the only one in this group that had deep brain stimulation. I did that 7 years ago. So that was 8 years into my diagnosis. And after that, I went to 1 pill a day to 2 slowly. Now I'm up to 4. But I've taken when I feel I need them. Once more, it becomes my decision. My doctor understands that.
That's interesting.
So,
Marty, you were going to say?
What?
Were you going to say something, Marty?
Yeah, I've also had DBS, but I remember the first time I took my Cinemet, I was really worried. We were going to a baseball game, and I thought there's no way I'm going to be able to walk up to the stadium, walk up those bleachers, and sit there for 2 hours and watch a baseball game. But I took my medication on the way up, and I got out of the car and I felt like a new person. I walked right up and I felt like I don't have Parkinson's. I mean, I knew I did, but because it wore off. Same thing happened after I had my deep brain stimulation. I woke up from surgery and I felt like I had my life back. And I'm on 2 medications now for Parkinson's because one side of my DBS is not turned on, so I still have to manage the Parkinson's on one side. And I can't say enough, if you're offered something like deep brain stimulation or some other type of therapy, don't just dismiss it outright because you're afraid. It's really helpful. It can give you your life back.
And people are so scared of something like that,
Yeah.
which I think you have to be very open-minded to because since in the past 10 years, they've changed it from being a last resort to earlier and earlier in your path. And I think it's important because it feels like it gave me my life back when I wouldn't have been able to function at all.
You were
unlike some of the others. I'm sorry?
You were in a wheelchair, weren't you?
Yeah, couldn't walk. I couldn't sleep. I was in constant pain. I had a very painful Parkinson's, not so much tremor dominant as a very painful dystonia, which is that cramping. So for me to be able to now, granted, occasionally in Mexico, I have to use a cane because of the instability of the cobblestones, but most of the time I get along fine. And it's been, as I said, 7 years now since DBS and almost 15 since diagnosis. But I just had a friend actually email me yesterday, and she said she was shocked when her movement disorder specialist mentioned to look into it and she should consider it because she's only about 3 years in. And I said, you know what, look into anything.
Right.
It's worth looking into it. It doesn't mean you have to sign up for surgery tomorrow, but look in, and I think those things are changing because now there's treatments like Duopa and other options too. It's not just DBS. And even if DBS, still there's a million questions a person should ask about before jumping into a surgery.
Right.
Absolutely.
But it doesn't mean don't consider it. You should definitely consider any option.
Right.
Except, and this kind of leads to what we had talked about a little bit earlier, bad advice, magnets,
Yeah.
there's, I mean, a lot of things you have to try, I think, as you're on your own path. Because I think that's one of the things I have found is every single person has their own path. And you can't rush somebody through it. So I tried about everything from CBD to THC to magnets to diet change. The only thing that I think is consistent is exercise and some kind of medication. But you can't pray this away. You can't hope it's going to go away. I think once you admit it and then move forward with trying to find your best treatment is going to be important.
That's
I
great.
really caution people to not consult Dr. Google.
Yeah.
Especially-
Yes.
Not licensed doctor.
Right.
So this is a sort of interesting question. What is the most difficult situation you've had in public? What are some of the situations you've had in public as a result of living with Parkinson's, and what are some ways that you've managed it? I get a lot of questions. I don't want to do this because, Parkinson's, or I'm embarrassed to show up here, or that kind of thing. What are some things that you all have dealt with?
I got stuck in a dressing room trying on bathing suits, and it was
Not vulnerable at all.
yeah, it was I was able to really laugh at it afterwards, but during, I really was genuinely stuck with my arms all tangled up, and I finally decided I had a choice. I could just stay in the dressing room ad infinitum, and I thought that wasn't probably very practical. So I called out to the salesperson and asked for some help, and I explained that I had Parkinson's and that my arms were locking up and I couldn't. She was delighted to help me. It was minor, and after telling the story, many people without Parkinson's get stuck in their bathing suits, so it wasn't all that unusual, but it was a wake-up call a little bit for me about putting myself in vulnerable situations by myself, that maybe I need to be a little proactive about that, but also to have a good sense of humor and know that stuff like that happens to people without Parkinson's. And I'm due to buy a new bathing suit, and I'm approaching it differently now. So I'm going to take a friend. I'm going to have my lifeline. So, the other thing is I've done a lot of speaking, and sometimes my word recall is real different. And I try to just build in bigger flashcards and have a couple of backup stories that I can laugh about and saying, hey, I'm having a Parkinson's moment and my brain's not all firing, and trying to give myself grace, which is one of the toughest things. I don't have to be perfect. And perhaps I should have figured that out sooner in my life, but having the Parkinson's has given me a little bit of a way out and a little bit of a lesson in grace. So.
I have trouble with freezing of gait on occasion, and it's always when I'm going side to side, like if I'm in a movie or a concert or getting off of a plane. So that's something I have to really just kind of slow down. It's usually stress related. I know I'm going to have a trouble getting out of that aisle, and do some self-talk. And then that helps me to get out of that freezing moment. And my physical therapist really helped me with that. So.
Great.
When I,
go ahead, Joe, and I'll go after.
Sure. Okay. When I'm a Grand Knight of Columbus, which may not be the most popular thing, but we do a lot of charitable work. But anyway, one of the things they ask for is the Grand Knight stays standing through the entire meeting. So I made it very clear to people. I said, guys, unless you want to pick me up off the floor, this Grand Knight is going to sit down when he's not saying anything, because it just doesn't make any sense. I think that's one of the things you want to do at times, is you want to let people know. I also serve as a minister in my church. And I let people know, I say, look, I have Parkinson's. There may be times when I'm not going to be able to, get over to you quick enough with communion or something like that. Very religiously focused about that. But what I'm saying is you can eliminate some of the anxiety by letting people know up front, not boasting or bragging, but basically saying, I think I'm headed for a problem here or something like that. When I go to road races, I always put myself at the back, and people go, well, you're pretty quick. You actually do pretty fast. And I go, yeah, but if I lock up, you don't want to be stuck behind me, because I have dystonia myself. And they go, what the heck is dystonia? And you get the discussion about Parkinson's. And I'll shut up. I would like to hear what you have to say.
Well, I had the problem. My kids were 4 and 7 when I was diagnosed. And I did a presentation for my kids, I want to say 4th grade. And afterwards, I didn't even notice it at the time, but he came home and he was in tears, because he said the other kids were saying, what's wrong with your mom? Why does she shake so much? And so that was a hard thing to overcome at that point, but that's, I think, when I started talking about people more and more about it. And so when I went the next time to a school presentation, I started with saying, I have Parkinson's, and here's some of the things I may do. And then the kids at that point were like, oh, okay. Because before that, the first time I hadn't mentioned it, but the kids noticed everything. So that was really hard, I think. It was hard on my family too.
Right. So this is 2 questions, and you can answer it at the same time if you feel like answering it. But I always find this to be super interesting from people. So what is something that you think Parkinson's took from you, and how do you deal with that loss? And then what do you think that's something Parkinson's has given you and that you wouldn't trade anything for? Lorraine.
I would say the first thing I felt like it took from me was my confidence. It for a little while, it kind of knocked me down, which I had worked years and years and years and years to be very confident, very capable, very professional. I loved my job. But I noticed that I doubted myself. Was the shaking going to be a problem? Was I going to slip? Was I going to forget a word? What was going on? Gratefully, my confidence came back. Part of that was because of what's been given to me with this, and that's meeting you guys. The whole concept of the DPF Ambassador Tribe, and knowing that across this nation there are people helping other people. And so by being able to share, that gift brought back my confidence or bolstered it. It had already been coming back, but That was the first thing I noticed, is that I'd worked so hard to be the person I was as a professional. And then I felt like this little Parkinson's glitch was an issue, but I was glad I got over that.
Thank you, Lorraine. Kat, what about you?
I'll start by saying my dad had Parkinson's, and I lost my dad to complications from Parkinson's. So that's probably the biggest loss. And my career, the shift in my career has been significant. But I have met the most amazing people, both in my local community and in the worldwide community. And I've found a voice that in my own personal story that I didn't think that I'd have. And so that's powerful and a gift. And the gift of grace that I try to give myself is also a gift. I'm still a work in progress, but I would say the community is huge. And I'm just very grateful to be here. So
Great. Thank you. Steve?
My career, I mean, I own the business. It meant a lot to me. I also I loved the bike. I did some racing, nothing like, like really serious, but some, civilian races. And I used to, and it was just a big part of my life. So being a strong rider meant a lot to me. I love to ski and I was a pretty good skier and loved to push myself. And so those things I lost, I lost my, some of my strength, some of my balance, my endurance. But they're, in the scheme of things, what I have gained from it really is, now when I ride my bike, I'm just really thankful that I can still go out and take a ride on my bike. I can still ski, 13 years into Parkinson's, I can still ski. So I just pick like a nice, easy ride and have a great time. So my focus has changed there. So I appreciate all that. And, the first time I met Davis, we were having a glass of wine, and, and he said, isn't a glass of wine like just a great victory? And I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, I like it. It's good. I never really thought of it that way. And then he, I started thinking like a beautiful like sunrise, a beautiful sunset, a beautiful glass of wine, time with family, all the things that I just took for granted before. Now all of a sudden I focus on that instead. And I mean that's really kind of what sustains me. Is just focusing on all the blessings that we have, and not, the fact that I can't ride my bike as fast as I used to, or I struggle going up this hill. It's just, that's petty compared to the other stuff.
Right.
So that's.
Yeah.
Sounds like a lesson that everybody needs, right? It's just what matters and what can I focus on. So thank you, Steve. Marty, what about you?
I think my self-image, just with some of the dyskinesia that I had, and then after DBS, this horrible weight gain that I've had, that's very frustrating. What I've gained from it is I used to be a worrier and a planner, and what's going to happen if I do this, and why did I have that conversation with her? I could have handled it differently, and I don't do that anymore. It's just, I don't sweat the small stuff. I just let it go, and whatever happens, happens, and I'm doing the best I can, and helping other people as much as I can, and living my life. That's what Parkinson's is giving. It's given me a voice, as Kat said. I was never a speaker, never a public speaker, hated to get in front of people, and now I do it all the time. And people really relate to that because they want to hear us share our story and how we're living with our Parkinson's.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Joe?
Yeah, I mean, I used to be a very, very serious runner. I used to run marathons, ran Boston 6 times, 26 marathons. I was pursuing running all the states. We've got somebody, by the way, who's an ambassador, Rhoda Folds, who is still at it. God bless her. But I decided to step away from that. The big thing, so that was taken away from me because I was on course to run the 50 states and on course to run ultras and all that kind of thing. And I also enjoyed biking. I still do enjoy biking. I still do enjoy running. But I think one of the things that people have said already is the key. It makes you focus on the things that really count, and you let the other things drop away. I just heard Marty say the small stuff, and that's exactly it. You just don't sweat the small stuff. That's the rule number one. And rule number two, besides this, it's all small stuff. There's a lot of living to do, and it's really great. The other thing I would echo what other people have said is it's great to meet this group of people. I mean, I never would have known all these people that I know nowadays, and that, you know, that I've, you know, called upon for help with understanding something or setting something up. That's great too. So, I mean, I think what you do is you look at the positive side of it. You realize that there are certain things that you can't have, and there are certain things you can. The other thing I always say is, I have people that keep saying, well, you want to be done with Parkinson's. And I go, no, I want to keep going with Parkinson's, because that's what I'm supposed to be doing right now. And that's about it.
Right. Thank you, Joe. Jill?
You know, I think we all are in the same spot where it's given us more than it's taken. But it's more that what is taken from me, my biggest two things is it's taken away some of my age. I feel a lot older than I am at 56 compared to some of my peers. So I think that's hard. The other thing, and this has been very much me because I know it hasn't affected other people, I cannot dance. I mean, I can dance, but my rhythm's gone. It's like my brain and my legs are not communicating. So that's been very frustrating because I love to dance. But what's given me has been so much more. As we said, the people, and it's not just the ambassadors, which have been huge because I've been doing this for 5 years, 6 years almost, Steve, have we been doing it? But the people in general, when I meet people anywhere in the world, and I travel, and I think that's the biggest thing it's done, is we said so many people my age are still working and still focused on their jobs. Now, some have to. I was very fortunate that we were able to, both my husband and I were able to retire, and I'm on disability. But the fact that we said, let's do it now, because tomorrow's never guaranteed. And I think that we all know that with or without Parkinson's, tomorrow's never guaranteed. But for us with Parkinson's, it's kind of right now in our face. So that's why we decided to sell everything and move to Mexico or wherever else we go in the world. So right now we're down to 4 bags. We have 4, literally, my whole life is in 4 suitcases, my dog and my husband.
I love it. I love it.
But that would not have happened. I would not be sitting here in sunny Puerto Vallarta right now. I'd probably be back still in Denver where I was.
Right. That's so great. I want to end with one question, and we're at the top of the hour, but this is what I would love to know. One or 2 words from each of you. What do you do every single day that is the most important thing you do to live well with Parkinson's? Kat?
That one's easy for me. I choose joy. I have it tattooed on my wrist.
Oh, Lorraine and Kat, you both. That's wonderful. Steve, what about you?
I just think about, you know, how blessed I am. I mean, I think my blessings, and then going to the gym, getting some exercise.
Yes, excellent. Blessings, excellent. Lorraine?
I'm following Kat. We're both choosing joy and we're scattering joy.
Go. Joe? Can't hear you. Hang on.
Joy. Oh,
Yeah, sorry, we couldn't hear you. Go ahead.
that's okay. I'm going to follow what was said before. Choose joy, scatter joy, count your blessings. There are a lot of them.
Excellent. Marty?
Exercise and stay positive.
Great. Jill?
Stretch and live every day to its full advantage.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everybody. I really, really appreciate you being here today. I know our community is going to love it. And you just shared so many wonderful insights and experience, and I can't thank you enough. So I'm going to say goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.